Chapter 9 of The Seventh Most Important Thing by Shelley Pearsall. Arthur kept hearing Officer Billy's words in his head as he walked to St. James House on the first Saturday in December. Don't mess up. A miserable, pebbly, white sleet was coming down from the colorless sky. Arthur had told his mom he wanted to walk. It was only a few blocks to the address on the paper. He'd insisted. Plus, he knew they didn't have the money to waste on gas. Arthur wiped his cold and already running nose on his sleeve. Stupidly, he hadn't thought to wear gloves or bring a hat. He just wanted to get out of the house that morning and get his first 4 hours over with. At least there would only be 116 more to go after that. He had no clue what to expect. Would Mr. Hampton have him running errands or cleaning toilets or what? He wasn't even sure who to expect. The crazy junk man with the ragged tan coat and fogged eyeglasses, or the polite, soft-spoken man in the brown tweed suit. He pulled Officer Billy's paper out of his pocket and checked the address again. On the back of the same page, Arthur's mom had drawn a pretty lame map of how to get to 7th Street, where he was supposed to go. Arthur shook his head. It wasn't like he needed a map. His school bus drove past these neighborhoods every day, although he'd never actually walked around in them. At the next street, he had to make a left. Arthur squinted at the numbers as he walked. Unlike his street, where the small bungalows and square yards were almost all the same, the houses on 7th Street were old, 2-story ones, jammed together like mismatched puzzle pieces. Some had porches in front and leaning garages in the back. Others had only a narrow patch of yard with a gravel driveway between them. Scattered along the street were some neighborhood businesses that looked as if they'd been there for years. A gas station on the corner, an auto repair shop with a couple of rusty cars in its side lot, a tattoo shop called Groovy Jim's Tattoos, and a small grocery store. The only thing missing was the address he was trying to find. Arthur walked up and down both sides of the street. There wasn't much traffic for a Saturday morning. A few city buses drove by without stopping. He folded and unfolded the paper in his pocket, checking it over and over again until the ink was smeared and the sleet had turned the page into a soggy mess. He was freezing and losing time. The closest address to the one on his page was the tattoo shop's. He remembered Officer Billy's warning. No excuses. I don't care whether you get lost, sick, tired, or your dog dies. He decided to pull open the door of Groovy Jim's Tattoos. A blast of warm air hit his face. The weird antiseptic smell of the place made his eyes water. He blinked, trying to see if anybody was around. Hawaiian-sounding ukulele music was playing somewhere. A black and white cat came over and rubbed against his ankles. "Can I help you?" All Arthur saw at first was a frizzy mop of hair behind the counter. Then the rest of the guy emerged from where he'd been sitting. There was no question this was Groovy Jim. Arthur didn't even have to ask. The guy wore a T-shirt with the words "Ban the Bomb" across the front. Green tattoos spiraled up his skinny white arms. Reluctantly, Arthur pulled the scrap of paper out of his pocket, wishing he didn't have to look so stupid in front of a stranger. With the way his eyes were watering, he knew the guy was probably going to think he'd been crying. "I'm trying to find this address," he mumbled, holding the page toward Groovy Jim. "Do you know where it is?" The guy glanced at the paper briefly and handed it back to him. "So how long have you been looking?" Arthur stretched the time only a little bit. "About an hour or two." That was what it had felt like, anyhow. The guy laughed. "That's all?" Arthur couldn't tell if he was joking. When he didn't smile, Groovy Jim gave him an odd look. "Okay." He motioned toward a door at the back. "Follow me. I'll show you where it is, kiddo." Arthur didn't really like being called kiddo, but he didn't think the guy meant it as an insult. Groovy Jim seemed like the kind of person who probably called everybody kiddo, even the cat. He also didn't appear to be in much of a hurry. He moved through his shop as if he was on a Sunday stroll in the park. None of this was helping Arthur get his 4 hours started any sooner. When they finally reached the back of the shop, it took Groovy Jim another few minutes to unlock and push open the metal door. A gust of cold air rushed in. "The place you were trying to find is in the back. See, the garage?" As he leaned against the heavy door to keep it open, Groovy Jim pointed to a small brick building standing by itself at the end of the gravel alley. "That's the place you're looking for." A garage? Arthur balked. He hadn't expected a garage. Had he been given the wrong address? How was a garage somebody's house? Groovy Jim glanced at him curiously, maybe wondering what was up. "You know Mr. Hampton, right?" "Kind of," Arthur replied, tugging at the jagged front of his hair uncertainly. He looked at the garage again, making sure it really was a garage. There were no front doors or windows or anything, were there? "Does he live there?" he asked. Groovy Jim shook his head. Don't think so. He just comes here to work. I see him a lot in the evenings, carrying things in and out with his grocery cart. I guess he builds or fixes things or something back there. What kind of things? Groovy Jim shrugged. Don't know. Never asked. He waved a tattooed arm at the garage. Go ahead and knock. If he's there, I'm sure he'll answer. He seems like a nice enough guy, but I gotta go back inside. I'm freezing out here, kiddo. Okay, thanks. Arthur forced a smile. Good luck. The door closed behind Groovy Jim with a hard slam, and Arthur was left on his own in a swirl of spitting snow.